Because people started working with these plants and animals such a long time ago, a lot of diversity has developed since then. That is, over decades, over hundreds of years, over thousands of years, people started to develop their own interests, their own tastes, and also the plants and animals, as they became domesticated, they adapted to the regions. And as they spread out from those areas where they originated, perhaps they moved up the mountains as some folks traded with their neighbors or with other folks that they knew, and the seeds went from the original location up the mountains or down the mountains or to hotter regions or to drier regions. Those crops and those livestock also developed differently, became differently diverse. So we know that almost every crop that we eat today and every animal that we eat today that's domesticated started that process, was started to be domesticated many thousands of years ago. There's a few exceptions to that, more recent domesticates that are important, like kiwi fruit that comes from China, famous from being grown in New Zealand, also grown in places like Italy. This was only domesticated and became really a crop around the world a couple hundred years ago. But aside from a couple of examples like that, almost everything we eat is an ancient crop. It comes from many thousands of years ago. Now, in the places where those crops and livestock came from, they didn't just stay there. Most of the crops were popular enough, people liked them, and so they started to move. First being traded within families or within tribes or cultures, and then, particularly during the Columbian Exchange, that is when Europeans first contacted the New World, crops started to move continentally, started to move from, for instance, the Americas to the Old World, to Europe, to Africa, to Asia, etc. And those crops that were successful or desired or liked moved quite quickly and started to really become important in the new cultures. For instance, even though Europeans had only contacted the New World in 1492, potatoes were already being grown in Europe by 1502 or so, just a couple of decades at the most. That's how interesting potatoes were. Other crops like tomatoes that are also from the New World, that are from the Andes of South America, but probably domesticated in Mexico, when they made their way to Europe, people were more suspicious about them. They looked like a fruit that was known in Europe to be poisonous, and so people weren't quite sure whether they should eat them, and it took a little bit of time to be adopted. But obviously it was. People love tomatoes. And in fact now we associate tomatoes with places like Italy because they're so important in pasta sauce and in pizza sauce, etc. Sometimes we associate them so much with those cultures that we forget, we don't even know that those plants come from other places entirely. And so many people might assume that tomatoes are from Italy, or potatoes are from Ireland or Germany, because those foods are so incredibly important in their cultures. But in reality, those crops have only been there a couple hundreds of years, or in those cases, 300 or 400 years or so. Those crops both come from the Americas, from the Andean region in South America.